Hey y'all, it's so good that you're here. Thank you for listening to Ketobiography. I just wanted to start by cutting in and saying that we do have a couple of technical issues in this conversation. Nothing too severe, but you will notice that our guest has a small connection issue. You won't miss anything. His story is fantastic, so please enjoy the show.
Hi, welcome to Keto Biography. I am your host, Robin Dobbins. The mission for Keto Biography is to share inspiring stories of healing, highlight personal journeys that showcase the transformative impact of the ketogenic lifestyle, empower listeners with valuable insights, and foster a vibrant, supportive community. Before I introduce our guest, I want to take a moment to share an update. After co-hosting this podcast for the past 9 months, Natalie Shamp is stepping away to focus on other professional and creative work. She has been a valuable part of our team. She played a key role in rebranding our podcast to Keto Biography and in many of the updates that came with that transition. I'm grateful for her support, encouragement, and hard work, Natalie. Thank you and good luck on your new adventure. Now, today I'm excited to reintroduce a friend of mine, Daniel Seedorf. He first appeared in episode 2 of Less of Me Success Stories. And I'm going to go ahead and say the Wi Fi was awful, so it's a little hard to listen to. He is a veteran firefighter with 22 years of service and now a lieutenant dedicated to reshaping the generation of recruits. Daniel's journey isn't just about bravery on the job, it's also a powerful story of personal transformation. Once struggling with weight, persistent health issues, and mental fatigue, Daniel found hope and healing with an NSNG, no sugars, no grain lifestyle. After hearing Vinnie Tortorich on Mike Rowe's podcast, not only did he shed 50 pounds and reverse conditions like hypertension, fatty liver, and even psoriasis, he also gained focused energy and an outlook on life. Now he brings that same passion and discipline to his work, helping recruits build resilience, fitness, and the right mindset for fire service. Please welcome Daniel Seedorf to Keto Biography. Hello, Daniel. Good to see you
Hell,
again.
hey, wow, what an intro. I'm blushing over here.
Yeah, I was trying to make your head really, really large, so I hope that worked
Uh,
out for you.
well, it doesn't need to get any bigger than it is. And so I'm coming to you from the lovely state of Alabama, which is where I live, and I'm on my front porch. So our our road is very infrequently traveled, but the house is close to the road. So every now and then we might hear a truck roll by, like just now happened. So I apologize for that. But anyways, this is where I like to nowadays. This is where I like to spend my quiet time because during the week I've gone from working a 24-hour shift with 48 hours off, now working Monday through Friday, working 10 plus hour days, working with new prospective firefighters, as well as managing logistics for our training center. So it's a very new chapter for me, and so now I split my time between here and Georgia, and so my time at home. This is this is where I like to be, and anyway. So with
You're
all that
good.
said,
Well, thanks for the little disclaimer about the road noise. That's okay. I'm also not in my normal location, so who knows? We may hear dogs barking in the background, but that that's the nature of the beast and how we do things around here, just by the seat of our pants a little bit. And that's
it's
okay.
real life. It's just
It
real
is.
life.
And thanks for spending your quiet time with us. So it's a good thing. I'm glad you get to come back on and share because, like I said in our intro, the Wi-Fi that time was kind of hard. We could hear you the whole time, but you kept freezing on us. So why don't you start off? What we like to do here is just let you tell the story the way you want to tell it. So why don't you start off though with kind of a recap of how you how you changed, like everything that led up to that moment, and then where you are now and what you are doing. So just tell the whole story. We're ready for it.
Okay, so it can be a really, really long story, because it's just like anyone who came to the realization and had to admit to themselves that they were unwell, that they were in a poor state of health due to their lifestyle. It doesn't happen overnight, and then trying to disseminate and dissect everything that leads up to that, it can be, it's quite the journey. So, like you mentioned, I've been a firefighter for about 22 years now, and so my story, as far as the decline in health and wellness that I experienced, is not unique to me. It really is a epidemic within the fire service as a whole, and not just in the United States, but it's a worldwide problem that comes with the shift work, the nature of the calls that we run, sleep deprivation, and just so many other factors that play into mental health that then plays into how we cope. And unfortunately, those coping mechanisms can be very unhealthy. Eating unhealthy food, or food-like substances, as I like to say now, or even numbing it with alcohol, tobacco, and even prescription or illicit drugs, and then so many other things. So basically, what happened to me was I didn't even know it was happening when it was happening. All I knew was I was becoming less and less happy. And frankly, I was thinking that the problem was everybody else. And, I mean, I knew that I was losing physical condition. And so, like most people, my approach was to just tackle it with exercise. And invariably, by doing so, I just jumped into really intense routines that my body was not prepared for. And I started injuring myself, namely my shoulders. And I was in constant pain throughout my body. I mean, I would get up in the mornings, and as soon as my feet hit the floor, I couldn't hardly walk because of the pain in my feet. And I wanted to blame the boots that we wore, which they're not great boots, but when I went to a podiatrist and they x-rayed my feet, and they said, "Oh yeah, you have rampant arthritis." And then when I offered myself to be a liver donor to a good friend of mine who is on a donor list, and I go out to UCSF in California to be evaluated and basically to have the most intense physical I've ever experienced. And they did, blood draws and analyzed my blood from every direction, as well as a stress test, electrocardiogram, every scan that there is, except for the MRI, because I do have a piece of metal floating around in my body. Yeah. Anyways, the results from that revealed that I had extremely high uric acid, which, for those who don't know, that's precursor to gout. So essentially, I was on the verge of just full-blown gout. I found that I was very hypertensive, which, if I was real with myself, I already knew. but I was in denial. I gassed out pretty quickly on that stress test, and then it was a few days after coming home, and I get the phone call from the nurse who coordinated everything, and she advised me that I was not a suitable candidate to donate a portion of my liver to my friend because I myself had a fatty liver. And she urged me to see a doctor and get on a treatment plan. And that was a hard phone call because I had to tell my friend, which frankly they said that they would give him the news, but I had to I felt responsible, and so I had to call him and let him know that I was letting him down. What I mean, I know he said that he didn't let me down, or he said I didn't let him down, but that's definitely how I felt. Um, that I had extended this hope to someone who needed a life-saving procedure, and I couldn't fulfill that. Thankfully, a donor came available that matched him, and he was able to get that, and he's doing well now. But that was one of those wake up calls for me that for a minute I was like, okay, I need to do something, but I didn't really do anything. Here again, I was like, hey, I'm going to go hiking every day, and I'm going to ruck, and but still, pain was persistent and and pain is a psychological barrier to doing anything that causes that pain. It's how electric fences work. Um, so so as many of us have heard, exercise is a poor way to lose weight, namely when you are solely relying on exercise as being the method, because it is possible, but the progress can be so painfully slow. And then too, like if you're experiencing pain like I was, well, why would you do something that always causes you pain? And so I was discouraged. I was very discouraged, and I kept seeing the number on the scale go up. Um, and then there's a day that my crew and I, so we were a four-man engine crew. I was a driver, and then we have a lieutenant and two firefighters. Everybody on my crew is pretty strong and fit, but so we're going to do a firefighter rescue drill. And the drill was that there's a member of the crew who's gotten separated, and now we need to find him, get him to a window, and hoist him out the window to remove him. And so we're taking turns dragging each other through a house that's been blacked out, so it's pitch black and everything. And then it was my turn to be the victim, and they couldn't get me out the window. And ultimately, they did succeed, but I had to help them a little bit. And in real life, that's not going to work. And so afterwards, I couldn't get that out of my head. And there's a saying that I've heard another fireman use, and that is, you have to ask yourself, are you an asset or are you a liability? And I had to be honest and say I was a liability. I was a and then I started analyzing in the ways that I was a liability. I was a liability to my crew, to the people that I'm called to serve, a liability to my family, and especially to my wife. So, um, and then it was shortly after that that I saw my weight top out at 250 pounds, and I was just like grossed out. And so I'm a firm believer in divine intervention. And it was like I was asking myself, what am I going to do to fix this? Because trying to exercise, I was still going for the rucks and whatnot, and engaging in exercise. But I knew that intuitively, I knew my diet was a big factor. And that's when I heard Vinny's first interview on Mike Rowe's podcast. And I think I heard, because I hadn't been listening to podcasts for a while, and I had been a fan of Mike Rowe for quite some time. And so I was going back to some previous episodes. So I think I heard it 2 or 3 weeks after it had been recorded. But now, when I look at it like that, I realize the timing of it, of me going back to listen and hearing it shortly after stepping on that scale, seeing that number after these events have happened, and basically the answer being given to me. And hearing him talk, and first of all, telling his own story, talking about the people that he's worked with, and expanding on the origins of our dietary guidelines, all of which I'm pretty familiar with because I've also been a small farmer for the better part of a decade, where I was raising my own animals and also milking cows so that we could have fresh raw milk. But even and so that's why a lot of people were shocked to hear of how poor my health had gotten, because they had always thought of me as being healthy. Oh, well, you're always eating fresh, and you're always, home cooked meals. We rarely, if ever, went out to fast food. And yes, I was eating, my wife cooked from scratch. However, there was a lot of bread. And one of the things that I had been using to cope with the nature of my job was alcohol. And I was a daily drinker on my days off. And I never thought of it as being that much, because it would just be like 2 or 3 beers. And to a lot of people out there, no, that's not a lot. But quite frankly, it's 1 beer is a lot. So yeah, so people were pretty surprised to hear how poor my health had gotten, and to see the list of health issues that I was dealing with, that wasn't just about being overweight. Yeah, now I did not follow the nurse's advice. I did not go see a doctor. And but I had psoriasis. I've had psoriasis for many years, but it had always been localized to my legs. But now, over the course of this experience, it's been spreading up my body. It was on my arms, and it was even starting to show up in small patches on my face. And also, like I said, hypertension. When I was seeing an orthopedist for my shoulders that I'd injured, and they were checking my blood pressure, the technician, when she saw the numbers on the sphygmometer, her eyes got pretty big, and she asked me, "Do you take medication?" And I said, "No, I do not." And she said, "Do you feel okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I feel fine." And she says, "Well, let me check it again." And it was high enough they wanted me to go to the hospital, and of course I didn't. Um, so anyways, so I've got all these things that have been going on, but I'm just like pushing through it, pushing through it. And so yeah, let me get back to hearing Vinnie on Mike Rowe. So much of what he said just clicked, because to me it was just common sense. When you, and the fact that I have raised a lot of chickens and quite a few pigs and even a few cows, I have a very good understanding of what it takes to fatten them up for slaughter. Now, it is possible to fatten cows purely on grass, but when it comes to pigs and chickens, the key to fattening them up is grain and skim milk, and frankly, and grain byproducts like bread and pasta. And so all that just clicked in my head, and I said, "Well, if it'll fatten a pig for slaughter, it will fatten people too." And I said, and so it took me a couple of weeks, to really wrap my head around what this meant I was about to do. Because I had heard of keto and eating low carb several years prior, and in my mindset then, it sounded crazy. I have a very good close friend who I love, who happens to be a health and lifestyle coach with a degree in dietetics, who at that time, when people were talking about keto, what was very dismissive and scoffed at it, and said something to the effect of, "Why are you going to put yourself in danger, like endangering your health by putting yourself into ketoacidosis?" Which is a condition I'm very familiar with as an EMT, because diabetic emergencies is something that we respond to regularly. But now looking back, I see that was just lack of education. Even though my friend had a degree, a degree doesn't mean you're educated about the facts. So I started listening to Vinnie's podcast and hearing it, and I went back as far as I could and listened to just back-to-back episodes, listening to his conversations with all these doctors and other experts, and I gained an understanding about hormones and the relationship of our insulin levels, what happens when our blood sugar is spiking, and then the effect on all our other hormones, and then talking about sleep. And I was like, good grief, no wonder I'm in such terrible condition. So, anyway, so it took me a couple weeks to really wrap my head around, and I pretty much just explained to my family and to friends, hey, I am not eating the bread stuff anymore. I'm not eating the grain stuff. I am not eating the sugary stuff. I'm not eating the high glycemic stuff. I'm not eating the starchy stuff. And of course, people say, wait, what about potatoes? I said, potatoes are starch, and starch is sugar. I said, well, what about rice? And I said, well, same deal. And, well, what about brown rice? I said, it's no different. I mean, honestly, explain to me how it's different. And then, of course, their response is always, well, they say. I said, they who? Who is this they that say that brown rice is good for you? And so, and then they'll be like, well, Asian people have longer lifespan. I said, but do they? I mean, honestly, do they? Because quite frankly, here lately, whenever I see someone who's a middle-aged Asian, I see a round waistline. And so I said, look, I'm in a state where I've got to do something. And so, people just started to accept that Daniel just is going to eat different. Daniel's not going to be eating the dinner roll or the biscuits. What really blew people's minds away was that I refused to eat oatmeal. I mean, I used to eat
healthy.
it. I don't, and then so yeah, and so I've got to ask how so how exactly does oatmeal travel through my digestive tract and then enter my heart and arteries to make all that healthy? I mean, it's such hogwash. So, because here again, as the point has been made, nobody is eating oatmeal without a whole bunch of honey or maple syrup or brown sugar or raisins and whatnot added to it to make it palatable. Because if you don't, then you're just eating. It's like eating wet cardboard, So yeah, and that was another thing. So I was getting so much fiber, and because I used to think, hey, we got to get my fiber. Fiber's good for my gut. Well, I was having some very alarming amounts of blood show up in the toilet. Sorry if that's TMI for some people, but you see blood in the toilet and it worries you. And hey, I'd send tests off. I get evaluated for that because I'm worried about cancer. And I was cleared, and I said, "Oh yeah, nothing to worry about. It's just a polyp, maybe. Why don't you schedule yourself for a colonoscopy?" And of course, I didn't. So anyways, so I stopped eating anything that's associated with grain. Stop eating anything that, frankly, is high glycemic. Period. And my diet just became more and more and more meat. And one thing that also helped me to wrap my brain around it being okay to eat this much meat is just because I've been active with the Weston A. Price Foundation. And I know that he did a lot of research around the world looking at the diet of primitive people who still live primitively, okay, who are hunter gatherers, or they exist solely in their environments, and all these people have these cultures have a very, very low to zero prevalence of chronic disease like that we have. They have no diabetes, they virtually no cancer, no cardiac problems, and the staple for most all of these people is meat and fat from animals. And so knowing that, plus too, I was a fan of the show Alone, where it's a show where people are left stranded in the wilderness, and it's basically a competition to see who can survive the longest. Ultimately, it's whoever can starve the best, because you have no resources other than what nature provides you. And those who thought that they were going to go and live off vegetation couldn't make it, because there's no naturally occurring vegetation in the wild that can sustain human life. It's just not there. The only vegetation that we can consume, well, are fruits. Okay, I've got apple trees, and so they bear fruit every year, but only for a very short season. And but really, nothing else growing out here is something that I can eat. I have to cultivate it. There's no such thing as wild broccoli. Well, there's some variant, yes, but we, through human engineering, bred broccoli to be what you see in the grocery stores now. And so none of these people on that show who thought they were going to live off vegetation would make it to the end. The ones who made it to the end were the ones who managed to harvest a large animal, like an elk or something, and then they had all the meat that they needed. And one thing that kept coming up is they were cherishing the fat that they were getting off of those animals. So, all that to say, it took me about 6 weeks to lose around 22 pounds, and then I kind of stalled out. I was feeling pretty good, but my waistline had slimmed down by a few inches. And to put all that in perspective, for the longest time, I was a 33-inch waist in my pants, sometimes 32s, depending on the manufacturer of the pants I would wear. And I kept, incrementally having to get a larger pants, larger waist size. And I found myself wearing 38-inch waistline pants, and they were getting tight. So my waist has slimmed down. I've lost 22 pounds. I don't know what's with all this traffic driving by.
That's okay. I just want to cut in real quick because we only have 15 minutes left. So it's okay. I'm loving that you're telling your story. I also want to mention that you are, in fact, in rural Alabama, so you are cutting in and out just a little bit. So, but please continue because you're getting to the good part. I think that this is a really pivotal part of the story. So keep going.
Yeah. So I mentioned this in the Facebook group, which is where I met you. The Vinnie Tortorich No Sugar No Grain Facebook group, and I'm lamenting about this. And someone pointed out, just asked, "Are you drinking beer?" I said, yes, I am. And he says, well, if you quit drinking beer, you're going to experience success. And that made me angry. And I was like, no, I don't want to quit drinking beer. But then I had to think about that and think about the fact that having that attitude means that this is a substance that has control over me. And I am the grandson of a raging alcoholic. And I didn't think of myself as an alcoholic for sure, but I knew that this was substance misuse, and it was not good for me. So once I cold turkey, hard stop, stop the beer consumption, and then 28 more pounds, just like, I mean, in the same amount of time, slid off. And now I'm back down to a 33-inch waist in my pants. And frankly, they're a little bit on the loose side. So,
And I just want to
energy
point out
levels
for the people who
are,
are listening that the person that I'm looking at the screen is completely different than the person he was describing. I mentioned before we started, you're looking awfully buff. You post yourself all the time doing different workouts, and you always pushing yourself to do more and do better. And because we only have a little bit of time left, I want to shift focus real quick because I think I only get time for maybe 2 questions. So I'm gonna ask the question. How do you apply what you've learned and applied to yourself with your eating and your workout, your exercises, to your work? Because here you are, a public servant, and now you're in a position where you get to train new firefighters coming in. Are you able to apply any of this into your work?
honestly, it opened up opportunities because people start asking questions. People notice, and they would ask me, what are you doing? And unfortunately, most are not very receptive because someone would ask me, what's your secret? I said, the secret is stop eating the things that make you sick. That's it. And those things are grains, sugar, starches, anything that spikes your blood sugar. And frankly, you just got to understand that. And so some people, are not very receptive. I have had several people who did adopt that method of eating, and then I would run into them a few months later, and they looked amazing. And then 6 more months would go by, and I'd see them again. My heart would break because I'd see they'd put it all back on. But as far as how I implement, basically I took over cooking at the fire station. The guys didn't complain because I don't cook bad food. But now that I'm in the training division, basically I'm carrying a cooler with me at all times, so that I can either have something that I can heat up, or thankfully we do have a fully functioning kitchen, and I can just cook up a pan full of ground beef and eggs all at one time. And like one of our captains saw me cooking a couple pounds of ground beef and a dozen eggs all mixed together, and he said, "Are you going to eat that all at one time?" I said, "No, sir." I said, "This is easily 3 meals for me." And yes, I would. I've just gotten to where I don't get bored with my food because I know that I am eating to sustain myself, not purely out of pleasure. I mean, I still enjoy it, but I don't get bored with it. So I do have a bit of a captive audience with the recruits, and I hear them asking questions of other people about diet and nutrition. And so I am not the official designated nutrition guy. However, I have taken moments to share my story and explain to them, look, the notion that oatmeal is your friend is not true. The notion that you need carbs isn't true. Your body is capable of producing all of the glucose that it needs to function. And it's such a small amount that any amount that you eat actually puts yourself into risk. Essentially, that's what insulin. As far as I'm concerned, insulin is more of a panic response to this spike in blood sugar, and your body is like, "Oh crap, we are out of balance. We need to get things back where it needs to be." So, so I can't speak yet as to whether any of them have taken it to heart because I see a lot of blank stares. Um, and I didn't see any notes being taken down, but it was not an official class. So, uh, you know, so my just like Vinny has said, nobody likes anyone to proselytize to them. And so I don't. I don't go and point out, hey, that's bad for you. That's bad for you. You shouldn't be eating that, drinking that. I just keep doing what I'm doing. I am leading these guys in physical training. In other words, exercise every single day. And I challenge them to keep up with a 49-year-old who just a few years ago could not do these workouts. So that in and of itself is pretty telling. And hopefully that is just going to keep reinforcing the message and make them scratch their head and think and understand that if it worked for him, it can work for me.
I love that. Sometimes it's just chipping away a little bit at a time, and just keep telling your story and keep showing up, and this whole concept of, yeah, you gotta outdo me while we're doing this physical stuff. One day it's going to stick, and it's just these small things over and over again. It feels hard because you just want everybody to do what you're doing, but you're doing as much as you can in the situation that you're in. And I do hope one day that this message, your message specifically about the health and wellness of public servants, not being this are you an asset or a liability? I hope one day that I think you're the guy for the job when you get to move on and not have to be the breadwinner or whatever for your family, but that to create something that could be amazing, that could swoop the nation or even further, getting our public servants healthy, because we rely on you to help us, and we need the best people for that, the most qualified, and that is those who consider their health as part of their responsibility for the job, like you do now.
It's the best job I ever had. It's arguably, being a firefighter is one of the best, most rewarding careers that there is. However, it's also one of the most detrimental to a person's both physical and mental health. And we have to be cognizant of that and intentional in how we take care of ourselves, so that not only do we survive the career itself, but then we can thrive after the time comes that we get to retire and pass it on to a next generation.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if we keep having people in poor physical health in these positions, then these positions won't exist anymore, and we won't feel safe. And that's just the sad truth if we continue in this direction. So you are making that change a little bit at a time with the people you interact with. They at least see you, they at least know what you're doing, and they know they have someone that they can go to, even if they're not doing it. The people that you've seen do it that have come off, they didn't have that community. I think it's there. It's just in that beginning stage. It's hard to be in that beginning stage. But you're doing the things that you need to do, and it's been very impressive to watch your journey. So we're actually like done. Like I truly appreciate, Daniel, that you took to heart. I want you to tell your story. I'm not going to interrupt because a lot of people don't know what to do with that kind of time. So thank you for sharing everything that you share. And I just really appreciate that we had to reschedule and stuff. So I really appreciate that you made this work. And and as a whole, it was way better than our first time that we did this because you didn't cut out as nearly as often. So that's also good news. But unfortunately, your Wi-Fi keeps you from telling your story to everyone, but we'll get it out there for you.
All right, you guys, that's where we lost Daniel. His internet feed just cut out on us and I couldn't get him back. Before you log off, I just want to let you know that he can be found on X at Real Fireman Dan, or Instagram at East West Farmer, or Facebook at Dr. Seedorf. On behalf of myself and Daniel Seedorf, thank you for listening to our Ketobiography. See you next time.